Okay, we're using a bit of a different camera setup for this video. Hi, I'm in the bottom left corner. Um, for this one, I want to talk about cold call scripts. And firstly, let's address whether or not you should be using cold call scripts, because there's a lot of debate around this. My answer is that yes, you absolutely should, but here's a caveat. The same way that a stand-up comic will have a book of pre-written material that they are going to use for their act, they also won't be scared to interact with the crowd or improvise and play off a big laugh, right? And that's the same approach you need to have as a sales rep. You need to have these pre-written descriptions and lines, call them like moves that you know work, that you have tried and practiced and rehearsed, but you also need to be willing and able to roll with the punches and go with the flow of the conversation. So the job of your cold call script when you're starting out is that absolutely you should just be reading this, like trying things out, getting used to the conversation, right? But as you become more experienced, you should be diverting from this more and more and more, and only keeping the really core things. So what should you be keeping in the long run? A great example is right here. So ramp, this is I can't highlight, but starting at so ramp up. This is my description of how I describe ramp up to startup founders. Remember in our buyer persona discussion, we said that we'll have different descriptions and different insights depending on who we're talking to. This description is specifically for the buyer persona of a founder because I know it hits on the terminology and values that are important to that person. So this says, so RampUp is a mobile app that teaches startups a formal yet highly customizable sales process on their own time. So your reps can close more deals and do it faster. Okay, so I know that hits on the major points that a founder wants. They want a simple explanation using terminology they know. They hate fluff. They want more. They want things to be customizable because they like control over their business, and they just want their reps to close more so they can grow. Okay, and that description does everything that those founders want. And so I'm going to keep that. I'm going to practice that and rehearse that and use that continuously. So the rest of this cold call script, this is really just a template that I can use when I'm going into calls. So we're gonna walk through this template, and you can use this breakdown to come up with your own templates that you can use for your own products. But then remember, as you get more accustomed to it, you shouldn't be using this like a movie script. Think of it as a comic does. So let's get into the first section right up here at hi, my name is Scott. This is what we're going to call context. So I had a really great sales manager a couple of years ago. And what he'd tell me is the scariest part of a horror movie is when you see the shadow like creeping around the corner and you don't actually know what it is yet. Once the monster's out in the open, then it's a lot less scary. But that tension, humans are conditioned to be scared of that. We're terrified of the unknown. So what you want to do is make yourself as appealing and familiar as possible. So first off, my name, very basic. You need to attach your name to it. And you'd be surprised how often that slips your mind when you're on the phone. I'm calling from RampUp, the name of the company. We're a Toronto company. So if I'm calling in Toronto, I always throw Toronto in. If I'm calling in anywhere in Ontario, if I'm calling in Canada, I say we're a Canadian company, etc. So I try and localize it and make it as relatable as possible. And we help startups improve their sales training. So just like a little bit of context, that's just essentially our value statement. We're going to get into a better description of it later. So next is the trigger event. So why am I calling you? Remember, this was from our researching video. I'm calling you because I saw on AngelList that you're hiring entry-level sales reps. Okay, that gives a bit of context, or that gives a bit of credibility. So, okay, so this Scott guy, he did his research. He knows why he's calling me. Next, we're going to move on to our insight. Remember from our previous videos, we need to be sharing insight that are tailored to our buyers in order to spur conversations. So I'm going to throw that in as quickly as possible. I know it's hard to find entry-level talent as there are no 4-year sales programs in Canada. Okay, that's a little insight. That might change the way they're thinking about their business. That might be something they weren't already aware of. So startups use a dollar training house. Now it's what value do I provide? Why should they listen to me? Why should they care that I'm calling them? I thought I could be of service as our clients usually see a 40% reduction in the time it takes reps to hit quota. That's a good stat. It's not a real stat because we haven't actually launched RampUp yet, but here I'd input whatever our actual stat was. Okay. Did I catch you at a bad time? Oh, I can't highlight. Okay. So this wording is very specific. I learned this line from a friend of mine. This sort of question is often a point where you can get turned down and where people can hang up because you're giving the client a chance to tell you, no, this isn't a good time, go away. So you want to phrase this in a very specific way because it's a lot better than saying, do you have a second to talk right now? Because do I have a second to talk? No, they probably don't. But did I catch you at a bad time? That's a little harder to get out of. And also we've built so much context and credibility and value already that they're a lot more likely to engage with us if we wait until here to ask for their time. And you do want to ask for their time still because it's just polite. Okay, so then we re-engage down here with our relate. So we want to show that we understand the person we're calling and that we can actually speak their language. So for most founders I speak to, their top priorities are to build sustainable processes and bring in enough revenue to grow. Okay, so we're relating to them, we're showing that we understand the world they live in. And then we actually go into our questions. So we don't want to throw too many questions in this because it's a cold call. We want to respect their time. There's a lot of talk in sales about building rapport. You never want to build rapport in a cold call because you haven't earned the right to build that rapport. And similarly, you haven't earned the right to ask a bunch of questions. You want to be in and out in like 90 seconds max. So quickly, just do you mind if I ask what your training systems are for new reps? This is a pretty invasive question, but again, we built so much credibility and value up here that we have the right to ask one. Okay, so they answer. We say thanks for asking that. And then we want to relate their answer, whatever they tell us, to make them feel like they're not an outlier, but that we can still help. So a lot of our clients were using those same systems before they partnered with us. So we're not criticizing the way they've done business. We're just saying like, oh, I understand where you are. That's a good choice, but we have a better one. Okay? So here, then we're actually going to introduce what it is we do. And you'll notice that this is the description we mentioned earlier. We're a mobile app that teaches startups a highly formal yet highly customizable sales process. Okay, and so that has been tailor-made towards the specific buyer persona. And from here, we're going to get to a call to action. So a call to action, this is probably the most important part of your cold call. This is, what do you want them to do now that you've had this discussion with them, now that you've described all this great value you can do? So I'm sure you have other things to do. Just be polite. But I'd love to send you some free content for your sales team so you can see what value we provide. What email should I send that to? So this is a very uniquely crafted way of doing a call to action. Whenever I do call to actions, I want it to be a value add. I want it to be them choosing to do something because it provides for them, not can I get 10 minutes of your time next week? Because you haven't really earned the right to ask for 10 minutes of their time yet. I just mentioned that before, earning the right to ask for time. You never want to be an arrogant salesperson who walks in there and takes time. You want to earn the right to ask for it. And so this is a great way of me just sending them free content, and that they're very likely to say yes to that. And then you'll see here, what email should I send that to? I don't ask like if I can send them content here. I never ask if I can. I just assume they're going to say yes and then say what email. And what that does is two things really for me. It improves my credibility, it provides some value, and then also I get their email. So it's another great mode of communication, which I've just accessed by providing more value. So again, like being a sales rep, providing value is just paramount. If you can make yourself a useful source of information, people are going to want to speak with you, and that gives you more opportunities to sell. And then confirmation. Feel free to send it with your outbound team, blah, blah, blah. When should I check in and see what you think? Okay, don't go, I'll check in next week, because then it's like, what, are they going to sit by the phone all of next week and and just wait for you to call? It's when should I check in with you? When works for you? This makes them give you the answer, okay? Again, we mentioned this earlier. Great selling is all about adjusting your methods to fit your client instead of trying to make your client fit you. And then lastly, okay, thank you. I'll call you then. Pleasure talking with you. Okay, so let's break down those steps. Let's just go back over those steps. So the first one is your context. Who are you? Why are you calling? Make yourself as familiar as possible. Your trigger event. What is your reason for calling them right now? Insight, build a bit of credibility. So in this instance, it's no 4-year programs in Canada. Value you provide. Why should they continue listening to you? Did I catch you at a bad time? Very specific wording there. Your relate. So build on that credibility. Show that you understand the world they live in. Your discovery question. So just 1 or 2 maximum quickly. What do you need to qualify to necessitate a second call? Description of a solution, so a bit more in depth than your value proposition you gave up here, tailored to the buyer persona. Number 9 is your call to action. So in this case, I'd send them free content, but you might be asking to send them a white paper, or just asking if they're the right person in their organization to speak to. And then confirmation and thank you. Always be respectful, courteous, all that stuff. Okay, so that is how you develop a cold call script. It's really that basic, 10 easy steps. But then the important part is not just developing it once, it's A/B testing it. So you want to break each of these components down and see where you're losing people and where people are getting more engaged. And when you identify something that doesn't work, try something else for a week. Try, like let's say that my relate doesn't work here. I'm going to take that out and I'm going to try a new relate for a week. And then I'm going to compare the numbers on like how many people like that relate compared to the last one. And I'll choose the one whichever worked the best. And I'll continuously be doing this. So I've adjusted this script already probably about a dozen times. And I'm going to continue to adjust it hundreds more before, well, I'm never going to finish it. It's always a work in progress. Okay. So A/B test and follow these 10 steps. And then this can give you a template for how your call should go. The initial call is usually a lot more structured than subsequent calls. But again, you never want to be just reading off a piece of paper because that's very impersonal and not going to build any trust that way. So that's your cold call script. In our next video, we're going to talk about the actual act of making the call rather than just drafting the script. So cool. See you in that one.